Can you give us an overview of your career, of what you've done and where you've worked?
Yes. So my name's Heather MacKenzie, and I'm here to share with you tonight some stories of things that have happened in my career, most notably the last one. But I've had a long career in healthcare, primarily in the medical device industry. I went to college at 17. I graduated college at 19. I was in corporate America right away, working at Procter & Gamble back then. Took a variety of different sales, management, and marketing jobs. I've been in some startups. I was with one medical device company where I took them from pre-revenue to 110 million in revenue in under 2 years in a biz dev role. I've been at other blue chip companies, Johnson & Johnson, General Electric, as well as a few other startups.
All right.
But I want to share something else.
Okay, yes.
Because as the lawyers were talking about, and I'm looking at all the slides, and I'm thinking back over my career, and especially when you guys were talking about Anita Hill, and I think that is like a generational and important thing, and I know that's a point that you like to make too. I just want to say to the young women in this room, because I'm no longer one, I'm 51 now, you know, like I had harassment throughout my entire career, and I didn't even know that that's what it was. So we don't want to deliberate on this, but I will share with you, like I've had bosses proposition me, I've had men put their hotel room keys in my back pocket at company events, I've had my butt slapped, I've had my appearance commented on. Just as recently as a few years ago, I had my boss at GE, I can tell this story, he actually sat me down, I was up for a promotion, everything's very stratified there, and he said, I want you to know, like, don't even try for this promotion because you are too pretty to be taken seriously in a boardroom and you're a distraction to men. So unless you are prepared to change your entire appearance, the way you dress, the way you do your hair, how much makeup you wear, your earrings are too big, all of that, your career is essentially going to stall right here. Like, these things just happen over and over and over again.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the reason why Heather is here is because you have a very large and I guess big sexual harassment or sexual assault case to share. I guess, where do you want to begin with that? Is there a good starting point? Do you want to start with the end in mind and work backwards, or would you like to start with what happened?
We'll start with what happened. And if I sound like I'm being careful with my words, there's a reason I need to be. And the two lawyers in the back are like, yes, ma'am, definitely do that. So it's the end of 2014. I can't name my employer, my client, or any of the names involved. I was asked by the CEO on the client side to meet with their most prominent and important person in their organization. He's a man of great influence. He is a man who, if you were to Google him, you would find pages and pages. He's extremely well known in his circles worldwide. So he refused to meet anywhere except a restaurant. Wouldn't meet at his office, wouldn't meet at a neutral work site. Insisted we send a limo for him. I definitely brought members of my team, not because I was fearful of anything, but I needed help. Like, I needed my technical and my clinical people to be there to help. So there were 7 or 8 of us at the dinner table, very nice restaurant. I'm sitting next to him, ostensibly to get to know him and to talk about this big project we're gonna kick off together. And we finish dinner. The waiter comes over and asks what everyone would like for dessert. And this man put his arm around me, unzipped my front zip dress below my bra line, took his other hand and put it up my skirt, and announced to the entire table that all he wanted for dessert was a beer and a blowjob. Like, okay. in that moment, you're just like, what is even happening? How do I get out of this? What am I supposed to do? There are women at the table. I'm supposed to protect people. I'm the leader of my team. Oh my God. And the highest ranking executive on the other side in the client relationship immediately was like, "Gots to go. I'm leaving." And I was like, what? You're gonna leave me here to deal with this? And so I got up in that moment and I said, you know what, I'm just gonna walk you out, because I was like really curious to hear, what is this man gonna say to me? He ostensibly has some responsibility for the other person who did this. They're in the same organization. And he put his arm around me and he said, "Hey, thanks for taking one for the team tonight." I I was like, okay. So that was how this whole thing, this snowball got rolling down the hill. There were 2 other incidents with the same man where I had to meet with him. I didn't get close enough physically to him for him to be able to put his hands on me again. But he reiterated, he was all about the oral sex, talked about that a lot. And so after the last incident, I was like, all right, I don't know what to do with this right now, right? I've been keeping track. Complicating factor, we were in the midst of a contract renegotiation with this client. Big contract, like billion-dollar contract. And I thought, if I go report this now, we might lose the contract, right? This person who did this to me is the goose who's laying golden eggs for the client. They're gonna protect him. And certainly my company is gonna do the right thing. So I elected to not report it at that time. I was gonna wait for the contract to get renegotiated. I was worried that people on our side would lose jobs if we lost even a portion of a billion-dollar contract. And so I elected to wait. And so now we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary in a week. It's early February, and I get a call from my employer's HR saying that somebody had reported what happened at the dinner. Without my permission, without my knowledge, just did it. I know it was a woman, and I'm sure she thought she was doing the right thing or helping me in some way, but I have to tell you, Elaine, it actually felt like a re-victimization. Because that choice got taken away from me. What to say, when to say it, how I wanted to say it, it just happened. So, okay, now here we are. First 2 questions HR asked me. They were none of the questions up there, by the way. They asked me, what did you wear to the dinner? How much alcohol did you have at the dinner? This is my employer's HR. This is a big company. And I thought, oh shit, they're not here to protect me at all. They don't care. Yeah. They're looking for something else. They made me turn in copies of every email correspondence between me and this guy to see the nature of our relationship, of which of course there was none. But I did not feel safe or protected at all.
When you got the phone call,
Yeah.
Did you go right away? Did you have a moment to gather your thoughts?
It was a phone interview.
It was a phone
remote.
It was remote. Oh my. So it just happened.
It just happened, like
no time to prepare.
No, nothing. I just had to pick up the phone and go.
Oh. And were there 2 people on the call? Or just one?
There was one initially.
Okay.
And then they brought in legal, and things had sort of snowballed from there. And within about a 2-week period, HR came back to me and said, we are here to protect you, so we're giving you a different job. You can't stay in this job. And I'm like, I don't want a different job. I like my job. I'm very successful in my job. I've worked in this role for a long time, and I've worked really hard in my career to get here. And they said, no, it's for your safety. So we have a great job for you. It's in London. It's more money, it's less travel. It'll be great. Okay, I'm a solo parent of 6 children. There's no freaking way I'm moving to London with kids. It's just not happening. I can't even fathom it, right? So I politely declined and said that doesn't work for me, and I'm also pretty sure I'm not the person who's supposed to be moved or punished, is what it felt like, a punishment, right? And so they came back in another 2 weeks and said, we have an even better job for you, and it's in Chicago, and 2 of your sons live in Chicago, so you should be happy to move to Chicago. I'm like, I also have a son who's a senior in high school and a daughter who's in 8th grade still at home, and no. And that was when they got kind of pissy with me. And my intuition kicked in, finally won over my ego, because my ego was like, all right, I can take that job and kill it and crush it and prove you guys wrong. And then my intuition took over, thank God, in my brain and said, I think they're trying to give you a job that you're not really qualified to do so that they can geographically move you far away, performance manage you out of the company in 90 days when you don't hit KPIs. Wow. And it was in that moment that I went and hired a lawyer. And you asked me earlier if there was anything I would have done differently. I would have gotten a lawyer immediately. I still was laboring under this, I've given this employer so many years of my career, and I've worked so hard, and I've always been at the top of the results list, and surely they're gonna take care of me.
Would you have gotten a lawyer after the dinner that night, or would you have gotten it when you got the HR phone call?
That's a good question, because I was in so much shock when this happened that I couldn't even process it for a little while. Yeah. And this happened right before the holidays in 2014. So you have all the added chaos of the holidays and kids coming home and stuff. And so I'm not sure the answer to that. I definitely would have gotten one. I would have said to HR, we're not even having this conversation until I have a lawyer. For sure. I think women, all people who are harassed or assaulted should protect themselves. Yeah,
So you figure out that they're trying to transfer you to get you out of the company.
And that's certainly just my feeling. There was
Yeah.
nothing in writing, obviously, but
But that was your feeling. Well, and also just you knew something was up because they keep coming up with these offers to put you someplace else.
well, and they had explicitly said you may not stay in this job. However, we want you to keep working until this gets worked out, because at the time, my team and I were leading about 150 to 155 construction projects, most of them multi-million. So they wanted that revenue stream to keep going. But we're also saying to me, where this specific man works, you can't go there, but you also can't tell anyone why you keep canceling meetings there. I mean, it felt like it affected my personal reputation. Like I consider myself a really integrous person, and to have to be lying and making up excuses, like the whole thing just got crazy. And so my attorneys got involved. They're great, all-female team. And they even said, like, this is so egregious. We can't believe that a company of this size is handling this way. Like, who is in charge of this? And so I felt safer once I had them involved. We started some conversations. My mental health is declining this entire time. I'm super freaking stressed out. I'm the sole financial provider for all my kids. I'm being told I can't keep the job that I've worked really hard to get and do really well at. And I just know something's coming. And I'm also getting all this intense pressure. Heather, you can't tell anybody what's happening, but we want you to work harder than ever. Incidentally, I was already working like 70 to 80 hours a week. This was a very high stress, high pressure job. And so I got a call one Friday. It was the, I think, third Friday in May. I was in a car with my two youngest kids on the way to my son's high school graduation. Emotional enough as it is, right? He's my youngest of 5 sons. And yeah, emotional as it is. And they said, today's your last day.
Wow.
We're pulling you out. It seems like you're about to have a nervous breakdown, which I was. I had already gone to my doctor and complained of insomnia and depression and anxiety. And they said, we actually think this might speed up the process. They said that they don't want you in the job anyway. We're going to help you get onto some sort of a leave. And so that was my last day. And so in a period of 24 hours, like, it just felt like my whole life got turned upside down, right? All of a sudden, I've lost my career. I've lost what I felt was my reputation. I've lost my income. I'm staring at my son walking across the stage, knowing that he's about to go to a $50,000 a year school, and I've agreed to pay for half. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what's going to happen?
So when you got that phone call, did you agree that you needed that break? Like, was it welcome in the mental health way?
It was kind of like it was like somebody else taking care of me. You know, like, I was so confused and I'm not thinking rationally, that to have somebody just say, this is enough. But it had gotten to the point where before every meeting I was going into, so that this job was like a remote, there were lots of locations, obviously, we were in construction stuff, where I would get a phone call from my boss berating me, saying, like, you better get this project across the line, you better get this CFO to sign this thing, you better get this done. And so I'm in tears before I'm going into every meeting. I'm trying to compose myself.
Do you think he or she was putting more pressure on because they wanted you to close it before they knew that you were going to be leaving? Wow.
Yeah, on one of the calls, my male boss said to me, Heather, look at the mess you've created. Do you think it might have just been easier to give him the blowjob?
Wow.
This is a man I had worked for 10 years. Liked, respected, had met his wife, had met his kids, he'd met mine.
Wow. So you felt very unmentored and very unsupported in that moment.
A little unmentored in that moment.
A little unmentored.
Really, I was just like
a little unsupported. But so did anyone in the company support you?
No, nobody was supposed to know about it.
Okay.
I won't say I was threatened, but I was very strictly told, you may not discuss this. It's an active investigation.
I have to say, I think I just realized why the stress was so intense for you, because you're keeping this massive secret and trying to hold all these plates up and overperform because they're...
For 4 months.
Wow.
February, March, April, May. 4 months.
Okay. It's a full picture.
Yeah.
So, okay, you don't go to work on Monday.
I don't go to work on Monday. My lawyer said, you can't answer a phone call, an email, you can't go to a meeting. And like the volume of my work was probably, I was getting 250 emails a day at this job. So to just have to sort of shove all that away was actually really frightening for me. Oh, I forgot to mention my boyfriend and I broke up that same weekend too. So that was great. So I lost the relationship too. So, you know, all of a sudden I go from working 70 to 80 hours a week to not being able to do anything, including looking for other work, 'cause I'm still technically an employee of the company. And so my then 18-year-old, he just looked at me and he was like, oh God, the house is gonna be really clean. like, what are you gonna do? And I will be very honest with you, as I always am honest and transparent about this experience. I went to bed for 2 weeks. I gave my kids the debit card and said, like, don't worry with a capital W, this will get worked out somehow, but it's like little W worry, so mom just needs some alone time. And there was a lot of like Netflix and crying and some wine. And I really didn't leave my room for 2 weeks straight. I was incredibly depressed. And then it started creeping into sort of suicidal ideation. And I knew at that moment I had to go get help for myself. Nobody's gonna come find me in my bedroom, like this isn't a Disney princess fairy tale where somebody's gonna climb up a ladder to my room and rescue me. And so I called one of the very few female executives who knew what was truly going on, and I said, I'm losing it. Like, I need help right now. And she said, I have the most awesome therapist for you. She's in Boulder, do you mind driving? No, I don't mind. She said, all right, I'm gonna get you on the phone with her right away. And this lovely, lovely woman got on the phone with me right away, heard a little bit what was happening, was like, I will see you this afternoon. You need to, like, clearly you need to come up here. So I drive up to Boulder, and I should back up and say, like, my old life, the way I used to look, I slept maybe 3 hours a night. I took Ambien a lot to try to help to sleep, but couldn't. I was addicted to Red Bull. I was not exercising. I was not taking care of myself. I was very like, go, 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 go. And I walk into her office and she's sitting cross-legged. And I was like, oh my God, it's a hippie. Like, oh no, like, no, this can't be the perfect therapist. She's a hippie. And so immediately, like, she's really good. Immediately, she could see something is changing in my demeanor. And she, you know, tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Told her a little bit more, and she said, are you familiar with neuroscience? And I said, no, not very much. But she knew to appeal to my logical side, and she explained that I was in a trauma response, that I was having PTSD, and that my body was physically reacting to the trauma. Yeah. And even though there wasn't a lion in the living room, everything in my limbic system was saying there's a lion in the living room, get out, escape, help. And so she said, would you be willing to try a few things to balance your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system? Your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive. We need to try to calm your nervous system down so that you can go through this with more logic and less emotion. And so I was like, all right, I'll try a couple of your things. So now she has me doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And as it turns out, all of it works. And I still practice a lot of those things today. They really do help in those stressful situations. But I decided, Elaine, that I was going to take advantage of that time and go on a really deep healing journey from all sorts of trauma, including that one. Because I thought, when does a single mom of 6 kids have like nothing to do? That never happens. And so through that entire year, through that journey, I ended up hiring a meditation coach, a chiropractor, a massage therapist, a nutritionist, a Reiki practitioner. And keep in mind, I'm not getting paid. So this is very scary to be spending this kind of money on self-care, but it really felt like a survival thing for me. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna come through this otherwise.
Just like with hiring the lawyer, do you wish you had found the therapist sooner?
Oh yeah. I wish I'd started to see somebody, and she is a trauma therapist. She works in somatic techniques, if any of you are familiar with those. So it is not like talk therapy. You're getting into your subconscious and really like digging, mining deep. Yes, I wish I had known her or known to even call someone like that as soon as the incident happened. Because trauma lives in our bodies, and so the more that you just try to stuff it down and bury it, it just comes out in other weird ways. You get ulcers, or you get migraines, or you get sick frequently, or you have insomnia.
So, and actually, let's go back to the actual incident for a moment. So the incident happens,
Yep.
And right afterwards, you're just kind of disoriented and not sure what to do. But you
I
must.
know I'm not getting in the limo with him. I knew that much.
You knew that much.
Yeah.
But did you go home thinking, wow, that was inappropriate, I need to tell someone? Like, what was kind of going through your mind? Or were you just all taking in the trauma through your body? Were you kind of just ignoring it and pushing through your what needed to happen next for business or for life?
No, honestly, I was recounting a lot of the other things that I told you very briefly about, right? Like I was like doing this slideshow of my career of like, this just keeps happening. Yeah. This keeps happening. And I will tell you, I never reported any of that other stuff in my career. I was either young, I was scared, I was a newly single mom, I was something. And in this moment, not in that moment, but by the time I hired my lawyers, I was like, this is not how this one's gonna go down. Heather has found her voice, finally. I'm gonna stand up and say something.
Okay, so let's go now to you're going through your healing process.
Yep.
What's happening legally behind the scenes?
So behind the scenes, my lawyers are negotiating with my employer's lawyers, and we find out that in the course of the investigation, 6 other women had come forward and said, me too. He touched me, he harassed me too. So now we're like, we have a class action lawsuit. We have enough people. Apparently, I'm not a lawyer, but that's what they told me. And we were prepared to do that. They said, are you ready to go public with this? Are you ready to take that stand? And I was like, I am. I'm ready to take it for myself. I'm ready to take it for the other women. And that was our plan right up until my employer's lawyers shot a little memo saying that I had signed a piece of paper in my onboarding paperwork 10 years earlier. All employees sign it at this company, saying that you can never sue this particular employer in public court. I mean, even my lawyers were like, I don't know how they're getting away with this, except they're so big. And so you can do mediation and you can do arbitration, but you can't go public. And so that really like took the wind out of our sails from a case standpoint. They were like, okay, now we have to regroup and figure out something else.
Were the 6 other women also employees of the same employer?
Yes.
Okay. And so they had all signed this as well?
They were all part of the investigation.
Okay.
It just kept snowballing, right? So one of the women who was at the dinner, they interview her. She says, these things happened to me, and I also think these things happened to other people, and it just kind of kept, like, the web kept growing.
Okay, so the wind is taken out of your sails because of a piece of paper you signed 10 years prior. So I guess note to self, read everything that you sign when you sign up with a new company. And what do you do next? What do you and your lawyers decide to do next?
So here's where it took a weird turn. So now it's been, we're in like September now of 2015. So I now haven't worked since May. And they just said, look, your employer has the ability to drag this out a really, really long time. Oh, and I should also say, right before that, the employer's lawyers came back to my lawyers and said, actually, just kidding, she can have her job back. We want her back. As it turns out, so what had happened, I'm getting a little bit of behind the scenes intel, the client freaked out. Not because I'm like the greatest thing in the world, but I'd been in this role for many, many years, and I knew the politics and the players, and I was sort of the systems person in this relationship. And so now all of a sudden Heather's gone, nobody knows where she is, nobody can reach her, so the client starts calling my employer, bring Heather back, beating the drum. So they did. They came back and said, let's just forget any of this happened, and you can come back to work.
Wow. Now, was this the same client that was at the dinner that said, thank you for taking one to the team, for the team? Really? Wow.
Yep. So we're still trying to negotiate an exit. By now I have like such a vile taste in my mouth from all of this. Like you told me I couldn't keep my job, which I don't think is legal, I don't know. And then you tried to get me to come back to my job after months away. And so they're trying to negotiate my exit. I've made it very clear I don't want to go back to this employer. And my lawyers, this was one area we disagreed on during the case. They actually came to me and said, look, you've been without a paycheck for a while, and they're about to cut off your benefits. We actually think you should go back while we negotiate the exit. At least you'll have your pay, and like your kid's going to college. And by this time, I'm sort of deeper into my healing process, and I took some time to think about it. I mean, I'm paying them. But in the end, I decided it felt like to me that I was an abused woman, and I felt like if you had a woman who was in an abusive home and she finally found the strength to leave, and she goes to her divorce lawyer. The divorce lawyer doesn't say, well, just go back and live with him until we figure out the divorce. And that was what it felt like to me, that I was going to walk back into an abusive situation. And so I said no, and I was terrified. Wow. Because I'm taking a big risk and a gamble.
So I do know part of this story, and you really struggled with what you wanted, like what Neethi had said, what is commensurate, what is, and what did you do to figure out what you wanted?
You know, lots of planning sessions with my lawyers and also lots of conversations with my therapist and just trying to figure it out on my own. I had decided in the end, there was just so much negative energy in this whole experience for me. You know, it was my whole world. And I wanted that part gone. And the further I was getting healed, the more I wanted to be away from all the crap. And so I serendipitously got connected to a woman who's a plaintiff in the Cosby case, still open and active. And I spent about a half a day with her, and I walked away from that saying, I do not want to become that. She is bitter and angry and depressed and downtrodden. She's been dragged through the press herself. Like, I was like, okay, not that. I don't want that. The other kind of thing that was happening for me at this time, so in October of 2015, I turned the age that my mother died of cancer. And that was like this really significant date in my mind of like, I'm gonna get time that my mother didn't get. She died at 49 years old of breast cancer. And I wanted to have that time be meaningful, to do something meaningful. And so that was another factor in my decision to say, I don't wanna drag this out for 2 years. Let's settle with my employer for what we're gonna settle for, and walk away. And so we got the settlement papers all drawn up, and in there was a provision that I could never file a suit against the man, specifically naming him. And I thought, I don't think that you can do that. And we fought for another week or so back and forth with the lawyers, and we got it taken out. And then they came to me and said, now you have to decide what to do about the guy, because you can file a civil suit against this man. Do you want to do that? The other women are behind me saying, we'll give depositions, but we're not going to have any part of this. Frankly, we're afraid of this guy. He's very powerful and very wealthy. No, thank you. So I had to decide, do I be that voice? Is this what I'm supposed to do or not? And we were coming up on that 300 whatever day limitation piece was, and it was literally the day before it was expiring. Wow. And they said, why don't you just file so that you have a placeholder? You don't have to decide yet. You don't have to do anything. I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. That feels like I'm kind of in control. They filed the paperwork. He was apparently served the paperwork mere hours later. He shows up at my attorney's offices in person. Like, just shows up. Wow. Not with his attorneys, but with his checkbook. Wow. And says, let's make this go away. Says, I profoundly apologize to Miss MacKenzie. I had no idea this happened to her. No one ever told me that there was ever an investigation. No one told me that she lost her career over this. I feel really bad because I did have a little bit too much to drink that night, and I probably shouldn't have done that, but I'm just sorry. And he actually used the phrase, I want to atone for my sins. Wow. And so he pulls out the checkbook and gets prepared to write, not right physically there, but gets prepared to write a really big check. It was a life-changing amount of money for me, especially as a single mom of 6 kids. And as he's leaving, there's obviously we got to call her and da-da-da. And as he's leaving the office, they told me that he turned around and said to them, again, please apologize, but let her know if she doesn't take this money, I will decimate her in court. Wow. That was the word he used. I will decimate her. And I was like, and he might be able to, at least financially. Like, I was like, he can't kill my spirit, but like I could, yeah. So it was, so they called me, and their professional advice was take the settlement. Since you've already told us you don't want to go through these years of agony and you want to be moved away from this, take the money, start over. Yeah. And I was like, well, here's this thing I have to do. I got to check in with myself, and it's making me sick to my stomach to think about taking that money, so I don't know. They were like, what do you mean you don't know? In the meantime, he's literally calling their office every 2 hours. Every 2 hours. Has she decided? Has she, we're going to get this done. Wow. And I said, I need at least 2 days. I'm going to go away to the mountains, and I'm going to think and meditate and pray and figure out what's right for me. And I had my meditation coach with me for part of it, which was really helpful. And I got 2 messages, like pretty instantly after she took me into this guided meditation. One was, your silence is not for sale. And the second one was, you have to forgive this man. And I was like, no. Haven't I done enough? Now I have to forgive him? But it was not pretty clear. It was an extremely clear message.
Why do you think you had to forgive him? Why do you think you got the message?
I think I had to forgive him to set myself free. That would have continued to give him power over me if I was constantly churning on that and constantly angry with him. And by this point in my, we call it recovery, I don't know what, I had begun to learn the skill of how to see people as their highest self and as their youngest child, like in their youngest child form. And it really has helped me. Like, that's been one of the most valuable lessons I've learned in dealing with people, is that we're all just wounded little children walking around for the most part. And it gives me more empathy towards other people when I'm able to sort of elevate myself to that spot of seeing them like that.
I'm going to make a statement, but also ask it as a question. Do you think that you had to forgive him because at some point you had to let go of all of the trauma you had experienced, right? You lost the job, you are losing money, you were re-victimized by this whole investigation not being your choice. Yeah. So at some point, and I think this is something Neethi touched on, is that you have to make a choice about how far you're willing to go. And this sounds like it's sort of the end of the line for you. And the very last stop was, I have to let it go.
Yes, so what I did was I wrote 2 letters. I wrote 1 letter to him, and I wrote 1 letter to myself, talking about all the things I was going to let go of. And my meditation coach has this cool practice where you take whatever this is that you've written, and you either burn it or you send it down the river. But it's that physical letting go that helps you sort of mentally let it go. So I did both those things. My attorneys were pretty freaked out when I was like, I'm not going to take the money. And they wisely counseled me to say, let's negotiate some much smaller sum of money just to give you like a little runway. Like, you're technically unemployed right now, so let's just do that. And so that is the exchange. That's why I have to be a little careful of what I say. I can't name him, I can't name the restaurant, I can't name my employer. But they had him come to their office and they gave him the letter. And they said he sat there for a pretty long time and looked like he was reading it over and over, and then he folded it up and put it in his suit pocket. And that was the end.
Wow. But you were not there to witness any of that?
No, I never saw him again.
Wow. My goodness.
Yeah.
So, gosh, I have so many questions. Where does that lead you to now? What happened after that? So you let it go, you took a small settlement, but now part of the reason why you took the settlement was so that you could do things like this. Yeah,
so I just, again, I'm pretty in tune with myself now, much better than I used to be. And I intuitively knew that this story would be important someday. So keep in mind, this is like 2015, so Trump hasn't even been announced as a candidate. Like, we have no idea the seismic societal shifts that are coming our way. A lot of them, most of them, very painful, but needed. But I somehow knew that this would be an important story to tell, and that I could tell it from the perspective of a corporate executive, to say, even in these well-respected, revered, big companies where, of course, you're going to feel safe, it's not necessarily the case. So that is why, my silence wasn't for sale.
Yeah.
So I'm out talking about this as often as I can. I'm working on a memoir. And trying to figure it out. Yeah.
What should women who are survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment do? And actually, I would like to pose it before the assault happened, when you were, throughout your career, how you started and talked about all the different forms of harassment. What would you tell your younger self now in all those times?
Get a lawyer as fast as you can and figure it out from there. Like, you're not in a position, I don't think, emotionally or mentally to be making clear decisions. Yeah. And when I was young, I didn't even know I had rights. Like, you were putting stuff up from 1996. My career started in 1987. I had no clue that there were any protections or any rights for me as a woman, as a protected class. I'd never even heard that phrase until just a few years ago.
When you saw Anita Hill testify in front of the Senate, what did you think?
So I thought one of my core messages when I talk about this is we must believe survivors. We must believe survivors. And I felt sick watching what she was going through in such a public way. Was just disgusting to me. And my message to people who even question things like this is that women, any person, but women, we don't make this shit up. Like, why would you? Why would I make something like that up so that I could go through what I went through? Yeah. Believe survivors. I think that's a really empowering piece, is when people, I mean, can you imagine the first two questions? What were you wearing? What were you drinking?
Did you feel, actually, I think I know the answer, but when did you finally feel somebody believed you? Because it sounds like for maybe the first 6 months until you got kind of a tribe of healers around you, no one believed you, or at least they weren't on your side.
They weren't on my side. It was a very, like, from the men who knew about it, again, like my own boss, wouldn't it have just been easier to give him the BJ, right? So there was just this very dismissive, like, you've stirred things up and caused a problem. I remember just like sitting at my desk at home being like, I didn't report it. Like, how did I create this? It's just something that happened. But yeah, I started feeling believed then, and it was so, so, so important to have that team. It was an all-female team of healers around me. You guys, I was like in therapy 5 days a week, in some form of therapy 5 days a week for almost a year.
So if I can summarize a couple
Yes.
of the lessons, I would say that if anybody reports anything to you, you have to be, and it's employer-employee relationship, you do need to be impartial, but you do need to not question the veracity. You need to let an investigator do that. And so you need to see and hear that person with as much compassion as you can. And I think the other lesson here is that if no one is on your side, keep going until someone is.
You'll
right?
find someone.
You'll find a therapist, you'll find a police officer, you'll find a coworker, maybe a group of coworkers, someone else to be on your side. Because it sounds to me like you went far too long with no support, no one taking you seriously, or at least what you were going through seriously.
And that's part of my personality, right? I'm a very, like, I handle things on my own. I've literally taken care of myself since I was a little kid. And now I'm taking care of 6 other human beings and raised them. And so it is not in my nature to surround myself and ask for help, and it's still something I'm working on today.
So I have 2 more questions, then we'll open it up for questions, and we're about to wrap up because I know we're coming up on 8 o'clock. What would have felt like justice to you? In the big picture, you get to decide.
So this is a complicated question for me when it comes specifically to this man. I can't really talk about his profession, but I can tell you that he does things for other humans that no one else can do from a medical perspective. So it was a really hard, like, if I take him out, so to speak, if I out him and get that kind of justice, and he deserves it, right? Like, you can't just be grabbing women in the workplace and asking for sex. But does this mean, like, I don't know, kids from Haiti die? Does this, and I'm not,
Exaggerating.
Yes, I'm not exaggerating.
You're not exaggerating.
This man really is in that position, and he really does do that work with not just children, but everybody. So that's a hard question for me. From the employer standpoint, what I was told was that they never went to the client. Really? That they never said what was going on. And I think that's wrong. I would have liked to have seen them held accountable for that. And my own opinion is that they didn't do that because A, they're really big and they can get away with it. B, this was their biggest client in the world. C, they were negotiating a contract.
Okay.
I was expendable.
You were expendable.
Yeah.
So justice would have at least involved the client knowing and being involved.
And also, I think that it would have involved my employer having to actually follow the law.
Yeah.
Like that was crazy to me. And I will tell you a small aside, I know we're trying to wrap up, but in the process of all this, there was a woman very high on the client side of the organization that I had grown close to and had a lot of respect for. She's also a well-known figure in what she does. And I was like, this is early days. And I'm thinking, well, surely my employer is going to do the right thing and go to the client. And then, like, she's part of this because she's the person who directed me to meet with him in the first place. So I called her on her private cell. I asked my attorneys ahead of time, and they were like, don't put anything in writing. But I called her to say, hey, I just want to let you know, I think maybe storm clouds are gathering on the horizon, and I don't want you to be caught unaware. I don't want to tell you what happened. I'm trying to, play lawyer and give you plausible deniability or whatever it's called, but like, I want you to have this information. She immediately said, was it so-and-so? Yes. Was he drunk? Yes. Was he sexually inappropriate with you? Yes. And she's like, that mother effer. We have talked to him more times. Like she knew she had a cancer in this organization. And because he's a goose that lays golden eggs, he was above reproach, which is how I think he has like gone on and done this for years and years. It's been documented apparently that he's behaved like this. So that felt yucky, right?
Yeah.
That was another woman.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so what he did was criminal in nature, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, like the Harvey Weinstein kind of, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. So isn't that, I mean, these very powerful men are being outed. Like,
Now.
yeah, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
you've already
Yep.
done whatever you've done, but just, in hindsight, and going forward for some of the young ladies in
Yep.
this audience, or some of even the folks my age and your age, this is not okay anymore.
It's definitely not okay anymore. In 2014 and 2015, at least in corporate America, this was not being spoken of. And there was certainly no like celebrities coming out and the entertainment industry setting up a $14 million legal defense fund. Like these are all wonderful things. But I again felt much more isolated back then. It wasn't in the like it's in the news every day now. It wasn't then.
I also wanted to make the point that if you have been harassed or assaulted, it is likely that he has done it to others. That is something that is never said when you get out of college and you get your first job. That you are likely not the only one. It's very, very common, and actually had a friend who was sexually assaulted in the workplace, and I called my father because he was a former police officer and asked him what to do. And he said to definitely get the police involved in this particular case, and he said the police will go and look at his record. They will see if he assaulted anyone on campus. They have access to things that the general public do not have access to, and they will make the case to the employer. So she absolutely needs to report it. So if it does get to the level of assault, you definitely should report it to the police for that reason.
And there's a wonderful company called Callisto. Mm-hmm. It's a startup, female-led startup, and they have developed a database and some reporting software where you can go in and share your story and share what you want to about it anonymously. And on the back end, the database matches you to other women who have entered their information, and match to the same man. And then if you choose to, you can be identified and band together with these other women, because I think there is more safety in numbers.
Absolutely. I have one final question, and then we'll open it up to questions, just because this is an information session, and I think it's important for women to go in full eyes wide open. And I say women, men as well, anyone who is harassed. What was more painful, the harassment and the assault, or the aftermath?
By far the aftermath. And sadly, going back to that word that you guys used earlier, normalized, it had been normalized that kind of harassment and even assault, sadly, had been normalized throughout my career. And so I kind of was able to, at least in part of my brain, write that off, write off the actual incident, but the aftermath was...
Yeah. Emily, you had a question?
Yeah, so I have like some, I don't know, like cross-speaker question.
Cross-speaker.
So a couple that like sort of came to mind during your story were, the first one was, so when your employer said that you like had to not talk about this with anybody,
Yep.
is that like okay? Is that like, what kind of like legal standing does that sort of thing usually have? Is that usually okay? Or is like, do you have any right to come back and say to them, that's not okay with me? I feel
don't
like
know.
I need to discuss this with my client? Or,
It works both ways. There's no legal ground that they can say, absolutely not, you can't talk to anyone, but it is an ongoing investigation, and there's usually a company policy that lawyer is willing to do the right thing, then generally you want to let them conduct the investigation and let them honor that. That doesn't mean that you can't talk to your friend who also happens to be a coworker outside of work, but it's a delicate line of when you want to, because then their response is obviously you impeded the
Yep.
investigation.
Yeah.
And so it's a personal decision as to where you.
And that's what I was afraid of, right? So in those early days, I was still operating under the guise that I would be safer following their rules. And I hadn't gotten a lawyer, which is a mistake I made. And so I was just trying to be a good girl, frankly. I was just trying to be a good girl and do what they asked me to do because I felt like they were going to take care of it and it would, all come out.
Go ahead, Neethi. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, follow up on your question. Did you mean at the end when you got your settlement, at the settlement time or the investigation stage?
When she was still working at her job, but they told her
Yeah.
that she couldn't work with this guy, but that she couldn't tell other people why she wasn't able to go to meetings, and that was sufficient. My sort of second cross question is, so you mentioned that HR asked you those two awful questions that I hope never to get asked, which is what were you wearing and how much did you drink?
Yep.
I guess my question for you guys is, if the answer had been like I was super, super drunk and I was wearing like very inappropriate clothing, like can that be used against you even if that is true? Like it feels like it shouldn't be a determining factor, but then I don't know how that works.
Well, I don't know if it'd be a determining factor, but when I conduct those investigations, I think that what Elaine was saying was accurate. When somebody's reporting to HR, that shouldn't be HR's place, like, boom, boom, the first two things. It's,
Yep.
okay, here's what we do, let's get the policy out and try to just keep
Yep.
it as neutralized as possible. And sensitive, not necessarily empathetic, because you don't want to have
Right.
bias either way.
Right.
But certainly, have it be like, okay, what are our next policies, protocols, give you information. If an outside investigator said, Paul, I would probably ask those questions during the course of my investigation.
Mhm.
Here's your complaint, and I just need to understand the
Yep.
full landscape. How much was everybody drinking? What
Right.
were you out before? Were you, and I need to know this so I
Yep.
understand, but I wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't lead with, that's like investigative, kind of like, how to best have, there's a word for it, I'm spacing now, but it's like no, it's a sensitivity to when you're interviewing certain kinds of victims. That you don't want to end up re-traumatizing them, but you still need to get the information. So those questions would be asked, but it's not like when then the investigator makes the analysis as to whether policies were violated, or when the attorney is making an analysis about, all right, how are we going to, progress on our defense. An investigator certainly wouldn't say, those are the defining factors. You would say, here's the landscape, these things, and then you have to address them and say, the alleged bad actor is relying entirely on, she doesn't remember what happened because she had so much to drink, and she was asking for it because she was wearing these clothes. They're going to say that. That's going to be part of a report, investigative report, but then the investigator is going to say, I didn't find it persuasive because of X, Y, and Z. I did follow up on this. She was recognized. These, she wasn't trying to oversell it one way or the other. She was very factual about it, and it wasn't in writing. Nor should it be in writing.
It just feels like kind of unfair that he would be able to say, well, I was drinking, and that would work in his favor, but she was drinking works against her.
But that's like classic.
Yep. You're here.
Is that true, or is that just how it works in my brain?
No, it's not legally true, but it is what it seems like. When you hear that and when people ask those questions, it comes back to the same victim blaming.
And that is what it felt like.
Slut shaming, and she called it victim blaming, which is just so much more professional.
Well, it felt like all those things, and I also had this instant feeling I've done something wrong. Where I'm like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have worn that. And incidentally, the dress essentially looked just like this with, I think, this exact sweater and shoes. But I instantly was like, oh my God, calling my girlfriends, should I have not worn that? I did have like a drink and a half. Should I not have had anything because it was a work dinner? But no, everybody was drinking, right? And you're allowed to have a drink or two at a work dinner. You know what I mean? But there was this instant thing in my head of like, oh my God, I'm in trouble. And I don't know if that was intentional for them to want me to feel that way, but it sure felt like it.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
So someone that worked at it commented that their customers, like on intercom, right, like which like is a desk, like ticketing stuff, that the customers like say like harassing comments to her, but to your point, like it feels very normalized. So like, what do you do as an employer when you have like customers that like it's part of the industry, whether it's like construction or
So,
to make those offhand comments?
you know, you bring up an important point and something I wanted to ask actually, Surbi and Neethi. Because none of the sexual harassment, I think, policies have been updated since the advent of social media, what about Twitter and Facebook and Zendesk and tickets and Slack and email? I mean, I don't even think, like 1991, Nita Hill, there isn't even email involved in this. So what about electronic communications? Do they qualify the same, and what should, in this instance, this person do if it's the client when they're requesting something via the internet, let's say?
I will clarify this, that's a whole separate we do.
Yeah. We'll be back next month.
We will be back next month.
Generally, what I would say, and again, it's a little difficult in very small organizations, is that the employees need to report it. And what they do is limit the communication with the customer and tell them it's unacceptable. So it should be coming from someone higher up. The employees shouldn't have to do it for themselves. And just, you know, we noticed or we were made aware that these types of communications are coming from your customer, or it can go to the manager of that customer, that it's coming from this person. And it's inappropriate and unacceptable with our policies. We request that you do not use this language, or you do not communicate directly with this person. This person will be your new point of contact. We expect that the same behavior will continue. But it is on the employer generally. Now, again, if there's, you know, it goes to that same founder who has his own issues, it becomes a lot more complicated. And I think in that instance, I would recommend just that employee, if she feels comfortable enough to respond and say, you know, I don't appreciate these comments, or these things are unprofessional. Can we stick to what your immediate request is?
Yeah, there is something to be said for having to find your voice a little bit. You have to say, you know, this makes me feel a little uncomfortable. And you don't have to do that. You can go and do exactly what Surbi said, but I would suggest, because I will say in my career, as I was listening to you two talk, I was like, oh yeah, that definitely happened. Oh, yep, all that. And I never said anything. And I think even just a simple, like, you know, that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Or just not okay.
Yeah.
You
it's
can use
just
two
not
words.
okay.
Not okay.
Not okay.
Like
yeah.
that's the verbal version of that.
I think that it's easier to say things as you get older.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Are you kidding?
yeah.
All the filters are coming off. I'm in my 50s. Like, yep.
That are younger than
So we are on the witching hour. It has been a lot of information.
AJ's had a question for a while.
I'm sorry, AJ, go ahead. Go ahead.
First of all, just thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Say that enough. How can we support you? You talked about writing a memoir. Do you have a mailing list? Are you looking for other places to speak?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. That was not a planted question.
No, I was going to ask at the very end, so go, AJ.
Please tell us what we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I am in a place right now where I need to split my focus. I feel like I need to split my focus between getting this writing done, which has been really difficult to get all this on paper, and have some income. So consulting work, whether it's in the healthcare space or not, I would love any sort of referrals to contract work, 6 months, 12 months, even a 3-month contract. I can work in strategy. I'm mainly a systems planner and strategist, but also relationship development, go-to-market strategy. I mean, I've had a 30-plus year career, and all of it's been very successful, thankfully. With regard to the book, I have right now a pretty internationally known author who's offered to help me, and so I've graciously taken her up on that, but I am looking for contacts for editors, for publishers, for possibly a place where I could get an advance, because that would sort of allow me to focus more on the writing.
So I will round out Heather's story by saying that she has not gone back to corporate America since this happened. And she did lose her 30-year career. And that's not to say that she's not going to go and do amazing things, because she obviously is. But that is one way that we all can show support, is by helping her with her career and all this knowledge base. And absolutely.
And I'm open to even taking a full-time role for a while, for another couple years if I need to, if it's the right role. But yes, to round that out, I have been told by 2 executive recruiters, 2 women who place executives in $250,000 a year jobs and up, that I am unemployable because I'm speaking my truth. They said, if there's an artifact of this anywhere on the internet, you will never work in enterprise again. It just sucks to have the choice taken away, right? And I am in a place where I still need income. I still have a child at home and kids in college, and I'm just trying to cobble it together and figure it out. And in the meantime, build community and speak out and speak up for other women.
Absolutely. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for
having me.
sharing your story.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for all
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.